Receipt Part 1, The Wallet. It was one of those gray, nothing special kind of Tuesdays. Cold enough to wear a jacket, but not cold enough to justify complaining. I'd stopped by the local grocery store after work to grab some eggs, oat milk, and a frozen pizza I pretended was, just in case, even though it was 100% dinner. As I was walking back to my car, I noticed a black leather wallet on the bench just outside the store. At first, I thought someone was sitting nearby, but the bench was empty. People walked past it like it wasn't there. So I stood there, holding my bag of groceries in one hand and staring at this wallet like it was radioactive. I hesitated. Part of me thought, it's not my problem. But I also knew if it were my wallet, I'd want someone to give enough of a damn to do something. So, I picked it up. It felt weirdly heavy, like a real wallet, not one of those thin card holders everyone uses now. Inside were the usual things, some cash, about $80, a few credit cards, a driver's license, a couple of business cards, and a photo of a little girl in a Halloween costume. Nothing strange, except for the name. Mark E. Halperin. That name felt oddly familiar. Not in a famous person way, just familiar. Like someone my dad used to mention when rambling about his college days, the way older people sometimes do after a beer or two. But I couldn't place it for sure. I pocketed the wallet and drove home, feeling weirdly responsible for a stranger's property. The whole ride, I kept glancing at the passenger seat like the wallet might vanish if I wasn't looking. When I got home, my dad was on the couch, half asleep watching golf with the sound off. I held up the wallet like it was a found puppy. "Hey," I said. "Ever know a guy named Mark Halperin?" His eyes snapped open like someone hit rewind on a VHS. "Mark Halperin," he said, sitting up straighter. "Yeah. We went to college together." "Seriously?" "Yeah, why?" I tossed the wallet into his lap. My dad blinked, picked it up, and flipped it open like he was holding a relic. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he laughed. Softly, at first, then louder. "I'll be damned," he said. "That's his kid in the photo. She must be, what, 7 now?" I raised an eyebrow. "You haven't spoken to this guy in, like, how long?" He shrugged. "Last time I saw Mark, we were 23 and hungover on graduation morning." There was a strange pause. Something passed between us, the realization that 3 decades had vanished without anyone noticing. My dad stared at the photo like he was measuring time by the kid's age. Then he handed the wallet back to me. "You gonna return it?" "I mean, yeah. I guess. His info's in here." I wasn't expecting what would come next. Because returning that wallet? It turned into something way more than a good deed. It unraveled a thread I didn't know existed. And eventually, it changed the way I saw my dad. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That night, I sat down at my desk and typed Mark E. Halperin into Facebook. There were at least 5 of them. But only one had a profile photo with a kid in a bee costume. I clicked message and wrote. "Hi Mark, I think I found your wallet outside Glenwood Market today. Let me know the best way to get it back to you. Happy to drop it off." Sent. And just like that, the thread began to pull. The next morning, I had a message waiting. "Wow. Thank you. I've been retracing my steps all night." "That would be amazing. I can meet you anywhere that's convenient." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the market later that day. I didn't tell my dad yet. Honestly, I wasn't sure if he'd want to come. I mean, how do you even tell someone, "Hey, I found your college buddy's wallet and we're grabbing lattes now"? When I walked into the cafe, he was already there. Mark stood up the second he saw me, mid-40s maybe, slightly grayer than his Facebook picture. We shook hands, and I gave him the wallet. "You have no idea how much I appreciate this," he said, flipping through it. Then, almost immediately. "You said your name was?" I told him. His eyebrows lifted. "Any relation to Tom Kessler?" "Yeah. He's my dad." He laughed in disbelief. "Tom? No way. You've got his eyes, man." And just like that, we were no longer two strangers trading a lost item. We were the sons and echoes of a friendship that hadn't existed in decades. "I haven't seen your dad since," he trailed off, visibly searching for the year. God, we were inseparable back then. Road trips. Study sessions. Late-night poker in the dorm kitchen. He was the best man at my almost wedding, believe it or not. I blinked. "Almost wedding?" He chuckled. "Yeah. That's a story for another day." But I knew, right then, this wasn't over. That wallet had carried more than cash. It carried memory. Connection. And now, it carried the beginning of something new. Puzzle piece part 2, the catch-up. Later that evening, after I got back from meeting Mark, I finally told my dad. He was washing dishes, half listening to the local radio, when I said, "Hey, I gave Mark his wallet back." He froze mid-scrub. "Mark Halperin?" "Yeah. We met at a coffee shop near Glenwood. He said you were best friends once." My dad let out a long breath, then turned off the tap. He dried his hands slowly, like he was processing more than just what I'd said. Finally, he muttered, I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. He sat down at the kitchen table like gravity suddenly tripled. I joined him. "What happened?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing bad. Life. I moved out of state for work." He stayed behind. "Then came your mom, a mortgage, diapers, the usual. We wrote letters for a while, then it just stopped. I always thought I should reach out again." "Well, he asked about you." That made him smile. The next day, they met for coffee. I tagged along, mostly because I wanted to see what my dad was like around old friends. They greeted each other like no time had passed, same inside jokes, same quick jabs about thinning hairlines and back pain. But what caught me off guard was how animated my dad became. I'd never seen him that expressive. He talked with his hands, laughed loud and from the belly. Mark brought something out of him I didn't know existed. They talked about road trips in a beat-up Volvo, a disastrous double date in '93, and a band they'd tried to start that never made it past 2 rehearsals. Afterward, walking back to the car, my dad was quiet. Not in a sad way, just thoughtful. "He looks good," he said finally. "Happy. You could be in touch again. No rule against old friends texting." He nodded, but didn't say anything else. That night, while I was gaming in my room, I heard him talking on the phone. Not to my mom. His voice was lighter, looser. I smiled to myself. The thing is, we don't always realize how many little parts of our parents get tucked away when they become mom or dad. That day, I saw someone else in him, a college kid with dreams, laughter, memories. And for once, he seemed whole. But the story wasn't over yet. A week later, Mark messaged me. "Hey, random ask. Do you still have that photo of me and your dad from the cafe?" I had taken one, just a casual snap of them laughing over their coffee. I sent it over. 10 minutes later, he replied, "Thanks. Didn't expect that day to mean so much." What I didn't know at the time was that Mark had been going through a rough patch. Divorced, co-parenting, trying to feel grounded. And reconnecting with my dad gave him a piece of himself back too. That one wallet had been the bridge. And somehow, I'd become the guy who found it. Strange, how you can be the hinge between two lives and not even know it. A few days after their reunion, Mark invited us both to his house for dinner. It was nothing fancy, just takeout Thai and some beers, but the vibe felt strangely intimate, like we'd walked into a snapshot from 1994. Their conversations were peppered with references I didn't understand, but I didn't mind. It was like watching reruns of a show that had once been someone's favorite. Mark showed us a box of old college memorabilia, Polaroids, ticket stubs, napkins with inside jokes scrawled in fading ink. My dad held up a torn notebook page with a doodle of a spaceship and laughed harder than I'd ever heard him laugh. Remember this? Our sci-fi movie script that never made it past page 5? Mark groaned. It had potential. They kept reminiscing, but I noticed something: both men were trying to reclaim something. Not just memories, but parts of themselves lost in the adult shuffle of jobs, families, responsibilities. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was repair. And somehow, I was still in the middle of it. On the way home, my dad said, almost to himself, "You know, I used to think friendships had expiration dates." I looked over. Do they? He thought for a second. Only if you let them. Later that week, I got a text from Mark again. This time, it was an invitation. He was hosting a barbecue for some old college friends, and he wanted us to come. My dad was hesitant at first, but I nudged him. "You've got the grill tongs, old man. Let's go." That day, I saw my dad become the center of a small universe I didn't know he missed. They laughed, cursed, argued about old football games like they still mattered. And when the sun dipped low, I caught a glimpse of something, not just friendship, but restoration. On our way out, Mark hugged my dad. "Don't let it be another 30 years, he said. "It won't," my dad replied. And this time, I believed him. I didn't just return a wallet. I returned a piece of the past. Part 3, Echoes of Old Plans. A week after the barbecue, my dad seemed lighter. He whistled while doing dishes. He cracked a pun at breakfast so bad it actually made me choke on my cereal. And every evening, I'd catch him scrolling through his phone with a dumb little smile on his face. It didn't take a genius to figure out he and Mark were texting daily. One Friday evening, while we were watching some forgettable crime show, he casually said, "Mark's coming over tomorrow. Wants to dig through the attic." I paused mid-chip. The attic? Why? Apparently, we had this old box of stuff we meant to bury in a time capsule back in '95. We never did. He swears it's still up there somewhere. I laughed. This is the most Gen X thing I've ever heard. But the next morning, sure enough, Mark showed up in jeans and a hoodie, a flashlight in one hand and a six-pack in the other. They were up there for hours, coughing through dust, tossing down boxes labeled Christmas '03 and Garage Sale Maybe. Every now and then, I'd hear bursts of laughter or the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor followed by, that was already broken. Eventually, they came down victorious, sweaty and triumphant, holding a beat-up shoebox sealed with ancient masking tape. We gathered at the kitchen table, each of us leaning in like archaeologists about to open a tomb. Inside? A comic book they had started writing and illustrating in college. A mixtape labeled Road Trip '94. A plastic alien toy missing a leg. A photo of them in front of a bowling alley, both wearing Hawaiian shirts and shades. And at the bottom, folded in 4, was a hand-drawn blueprint titled Business Plan, M&M's Used Books and Weird Stuff. I nearly spit out my drink. "You two were gonna start a bookstore?" Mark chuckled. "Yeah. It was going to have a second floor where we hosted poetry slams and Dungeons and Dragons nights. Your dad was going to be in charge of snacks." My dad nodded, eyes soft. We spent a whole semester sketching it out. Even had a location in mind near campus. Then, real life happened. Mark looked at me and said, "Your dad always said he'd revisit the idea one day." There was a pause. The kind that stretches, not awkward but full. Like everyone in the room suddenly realized time was a real thing. Then my dad smiled. Well, we're not dead yet. That evening, they sat out on the porch with beers and the plan between them. I watched from the window, a little stunned. I'd never seen my dad look more alive. Later, I sat next to him, the glow of the porch light casting warm shadows on his face. "You thinking about doing it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at the stars like they owed him something. "Maybe not exactly that," he said finally. "But something. I forgot what dreaming felt like, you know." I did know. And it made me ache a little, for him, for myself, for all the people who quietly shelved pieces of themselves in the name of being responsible. That week, something shifted. My dad started sketching again. Not full-on blueprints, but doodles, layouts, notes in the margins of the newspaper. Mark sent links to book cafe concepts and community pop-up ideas. It was playful, not serious. But it was alive. And somehow, I found myself drawn in too. I suggested a logo. Help make a simple website mock-up. My girlfriend, a graphic designer, pitched in with branding ideas. Soon we were throwing out names, second chapters, the dust jacket, the lost page. They ended up settling on Chapter 2. Not bad for two aging nerds, Mark joked. I didn't realize until then how much I needed this too, not the bookstore, but the energy. The hope. Watching two old friends breathe life into an abandoned dream reminded me that nothing has to stay buried. That maybe it's okay to look back if you're reaching for something forward. That weekend, they visited an empty storefront downtown. Just for fun, they said. Scouting vibes. They came back glowing like teenagers. Of course, it was just talk. They weren't taking out loans or signing leases. But still, it felt like something had been unearthed. My dad wasn't just reminiscing anymore. He was remembering how to live. And I, somehow, had become the bridge between their then and now. The next day, Mark sent over an old picture, my dad, arms crossed, standing in front of their college dorm with a huge cardboard sign that read, "One day, our bookstore will have coffee stronger than our GPA." He captioned it, "Still waiting on that coffee." I printed it and taped it to our fridge. A dream, half forgotten, was waking up in our house, and this time, we were all in the room for it. Part 4, Between the Pages of the Present. The weekend after their scouting trip to the downtown storefront, life settled back into its usual rhythm, or at least, it tried to. But something had shifted. You could feel it in the air. Like a quiet buzz under the surface. My dad was different. Not in any dramatic, shouting from the rooftops kind of way. But the kind of different where his eyes stayed on you a little longer when you spoke. Where he poured his morning coffee and stood by the window just a few seconds more than usual, like he was listening for something he hadn't heard in years. The funny thing is, Mark didn't visit that week. He got caught up in a work conference out of town. But it didn't stop the messages. My dad, who once asked me how to open the Facebook, was now voice noting like a teenager. I'd catch snippets sometimes. "Do you remember that green couch we nearly set on fire? Looked into insurance for small business, rates aren't bad in our zip. I found a guy who sells reclaimed bookshelves." The spark hadn't gone out. It had just found more oxygen. One night, I walked past the living room and saw my dad, alone, sketching in his notebook. Not watching TV. Not doom scrolling. Just pencil in hand, brow furrowed, tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth, the way he used to look when fixing my old RC car. He didn't notice me standing there. And I didn't interrupt. Later, he showed me the sketch. It was a floor plan, Chapter 2, version 3-point-something. It had little stick figures labeled me and Mark behind a counter. A kid curled up in the reading nook. A small stage labeled Open Mic Fridays. I smiled and said, "You gave yourself more hair than you've had since 1998. He smirked. "It's aspirational." That week, I visited my mom's grave. It wasn't something I did often. Not because I didn't love her, I did. But because I didn't know what to say. She had died when I was in college, and grief has a funny way of making time both freeze and collapse. But lately, I'd been thinking about her more. What she would have said about all this. About my dad rediscovering parts of himself. About me, still flailing through my mid-20s like a drunk duck with a GPS. I sat by her stone and said the first honest thing that came to mind, "I think he's coming back to life." And then I cried. Ugly, hiccuping, shoulder-shaking tears. The kind I didn't even know were still in me. I told her about the attic, the bookstore plan, the weird alien toy, Mark's terrible Hawaiian shirts. I told her everything, and for once, I didn't feel like I was talking to granite. I felt like she was listening. When I got home, my dad didn't ask why my eyes were red. He just handed me a mug of tea and said, "You good?" I nodded. Getting there. Mark came back the next weekend, and this time he brought a binder. "I organized the ideas," he said, like that sentence wasn't completely wild coming from a man whose last organized thing was probably his CD tower in 2003. They sat for hours at the kitchen table, flipping pages, taking notes, disagreeing on carpet samples, and reminiscing about the smell of old bookstores. And then came the moment. "I booked a meeting with the property owner downtown," Mark said. "Just to talk." My dad froze mid-sip. "You serious?" "Completely. No pressure." But I figured, if not now, when? There it was. That line. If not now, when? It echoed in my head for days. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but reflect on my own life. I'd been in my job for 3 years. It paid the bills, but that was about it. No spark. No legacy. Just a loop of emails and spreadsheets and coffee that tasted like it had given up hope. But watching my dad and Mark, two guys with creaky knees and bad backs, start laying bricks on a dream they'd buried 3 decades ago? That messed with me in the best way. I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just little blog posts, story ideas, random essays I used to jot down in college but abandoned because real life didn't have room for them. I stayed up too late one night and drafted a piece about how finding a wallet reconnected 2 old friends and accidentally lit a fire in a tired young adult. I didn't post it. Not yet. But it was the first time in months I felt like I had something to say. The meeting with the property owner came and went. I wasn't invited, obviously, grown-up stuff. But my dad came home that night with a look on his face I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. "What happened?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He set down his keys and leaned on the counter. "We're thinking about making an offer." My heart did a weird thing, like a jolt and a hug at the same time. "Are you scared?" I asked. "Terrified," he said. "But also, not." There was a pause. I forgot I could still surprise myself. I didn't say anything. Just hugged him. Tight. Later that week, I found a sticky note on my desk. It wasn't signed, but I knew his handwriting. It said, "Thanks for the wallet." I kept it in my notebook. Sometimes, the biggest changes come not from earthquakes or fireworks, but from one small, kind act. A wallet. A name. A memory. And now, a future. Part 5, the chapter yet to be written. The offer went through. It took weeks of phone calls, back-and-forth emails, home inspections, and what felt like 100 cups of gas station coffee, but finally, the building downtown was theirs. Or, technically, it was under a lease-to-own agreement, but semantics didn't matter. What mattered was the key in my dad's hand, the dust in his hair, and the grin on his face when he opened that door for the first time and stepped into possibility. It smelled like mildew and memories. The old wooden shelves still stood, leaning like tired soldiers. The floor creaked with every step. A layer of dust coated the counters, and cobwebs danced in the window light. But where most people would have seen a tired, forgotten place, my dad and Mark saw bones, strong ones. "We'll need to gut half of it," Mark said, clapping his hands together like he'd just found buried treasure. "But this wall here, this one stays." I watched as they walked the perimeter, gesturing, imagining, sketching with their hands in the air. They weren't just reclaiming a building, they were reclaiming time. Reclaiming themselves. Every Saturday, I started showing up. At first just to watch. Then to sweep. Then to help haul out junk that hadn't seen daylight since the Clinton administration. My dad and I didn't talk much while we worked, we didn't need to. The rhythm of progress spoke for us. The shared silence between hammers and heavy lifts was oddly comforting. Sometimes, I'd bring lunch. One afternoon, we sat on overturned crates eating sandwiches, sawdust in our hair. "You think people will come?" I asked him. He chewed for a moment. "I don't know." Another pause. "But I think we're finally showing up for ourselves. That counts for something." Meanwhile, Mark had taken it upon himself to be the unofficial hype man of the project. He made a Facebook page for the upcoming shop, Chapter 2 Books and Brews. He posted old photos of him and my dad from college, alongside progress shots of the renovations. People noticed. Comments started flooding in. "Wait, is this where Mackenzie's books used to be? I loved that corner. Can't wait to visit, this is exactly what our town needs." Even my own friends began messaging me. "Dude. Your dad is building a bookstore." It was surreal. Then came the soft launch. They didn't have shelves stocked yet, but they opened the doors one Saturday to anyone curious. There was coffee. Folding chairs. A few kids coloring at a makeshift reading table. The smell of new beginnings, sharp and sweet like fresh paint and nervous sweat. My dad stood by the entrance, a bit stiff in his flannel button-up, greeting people with that classic half-smile he'd always worn. Mark played barista with comical flair, accidentally serving someone a decaf when they'd asked for double espresso. I sat in the corner, watching it all, overwhelmed by something I couldn't name. Maybe pride. Maybe disbelief. Maybe just the simple beauty of witnessing a dream no longer deferred. A woman approached me, late 30s, maybe early 40s. "You the one who found the wallet?" she asked. I blinked. Yeah. She smiled. "My brother's friend shared your story online. Said it reminded him of something he'd forgotten he needed." She looked around. "I think we all forgot we needed places like this." And just like that, I understood. This wasn't just about books or coffee or even second chances. It was about connection. About what happens when one quiet gesture, returning a wallet, sending a message, ripples outward, threading people together in ways you can't predict. Months passed. The grand opening came and went with fanfare. Local news even did a segment. "Two old friends turn dusty dream into community gem," the headline read. My dad? He didn't say much about it. But I noticed he started wearing a shirt that said, "Ask me about my bookstore," every Saturday. And me? I finally posted that blog piece. It got shared more than I expected. People messaged me, strangers, saying it gave them hope. Made them call someone they hadn't talked to in years. Made them believe that maybe they could still change something. I even got invited to do a small reading at Open Mic Friday one night. I read the story. The whole thing. And when I finished, I looked up to see my dad in the back, standing against the wall like he always did. He didn't clap first. But he clapped loudest. Later that night, he hugged me, actually hugged me, and whispered. "Thanks for the reminder." I knew what he meant. Somewhere between the shelves and the silence, we had found our way back to each other. A wallet. A name. A memory. A future. Chapter 2.